Yeah, yeah, perfect. Okay, so I just want to welcome everybody to the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing's Truth and Reconciliation Planning Subcommittee. Thank you all for being here. My name is Lakiana. I'm one of the alternate co-chairs for PCCEP. If we can just get our PCCEP members to go around, just introduce yourself, your pronouns as well. Mine are he, him, and his. And then we'll do just a quick introduction for everybody else on the call, just your name, your pronouns, any organization that you're here on behalf of, and for the community members, just maybe one reason why you're here. And we'll start with Taji as far as PCCEP members, and if you just want to pass it on to the next PCCEP member after you.
Yes, hello everyone, good afternoon. Taji Chesimit, I use he, him pronouns. I'm the co-chair of PCCEP, and yeah, I think that's it. Welcome everyone. I think I'll pass it to Anne.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Ann Campbell, she, her pronouns, and I'm secretary on the steering committee. And I will pass it to, how about Judith?
Thank you. And I'm Judith Mowry. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Policy Advisor at the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And I help the staff support the PCCEP.
Do you want to pass it to someone?
My apologies. I will pass it to Carol.
Carol, me. Hi, I'm Carol. My pronouns are Z and Zier, and I'm here representing Jewish Voice for Peace. And as an activist, very involved in supporting Palestinian human rights and justice, this is a very important concept to me. Brody?
Hi, I'm Brody Sargent. I am the program specialist for the Portland Police Bureau's Equity and Inclusion Office, and I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I will pass it to Marlon.
Hello, my name is Marlon Marion. I'm the Equity and Inclusion Manager for the Portland Police Bureau. I use he, him pronouns, and I will pass it to Candace.
Hello, my name is Candace Avalos. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the chair of the Citizen Review Committee, which is the Police Accountability Board for the City of Portland. And I will pass it to Manuel.
Manuel, you there? He's also just coming in from a walk, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, Candace. I didn't realize that you said my name. It sounded like another name to me over the phone. My name is Manuel Padilla, and I'm a project manager a project manager with the National Policy Consensus Center, specifically with Oregon Solutions. And I don't know who is on the call since I'm on the phone, so I would really appreciate it if someone would pass the ball for me.
Yeah, why don't we pass it on to Kathy?
Hi, I don't know you. You don't know me. My name is Kathy Salvaggio. I live in West Lynn actually, and I've headed up for the past year something called the West Lynn Community for Police Reform in response to a horrible incident that some of you might be familiar with called or related to a Black man from Portland called Michael Fesser. Somebody from your group has been posting on our Facebook page, and I was just intrigued. Thank you, Claudia. And I was intrigued about what you are doing. I mean, I've vaguely followed stuff in Portland because some of it is, of course, parallel to some of the things we're doing here, although they're particular. So let me just say I appreciate the work you're doing. I have worked a lot in developing countries, and I am absolutely committed to truth and reconciliation processes. So whatever you do along those lines, I'd love to hear more about it. Who hasn't been called on? So it looks like How about Emery? Have you been called on? I don't know most of you, so I've lost track.
Yeah, hi. Oh, shoot. Hey, can you hear me now? Okay. Hey, I'm Emery. I use he, him pronouns. I'm on the coordinating committee of a coalition in Portland called the Portland Metro People's Coalition. And I found out about this event because Lakiana posted about it, and I followed PCCEP, a lot of what PCCEP does for a while, and follow policing issues closely in the city. And I'm most interested to hear that that this commission is studying how other regions and peoples went through truth and reconciliation. I think that's a very important thing to study, because I think that's a process that people here need to consider going through and how that might happen, if it happens. Okay, I don't know.
What I'll do is I'll just call on the next person so we don't lose track of it and it doesn't make it hard on all of our guests. Thank you, Emery. No, I got to figure out where we are. Let's go with Eduardo.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to see that I am not muted, which always happens. I am Eduardo Gonzalez. I am Peruvian of origin. My pronouns are he, him. And I have worked organizing and supporting the work of truth commissions in different parts of the world for the last 20 years. So I am currently advising the Mary Hawk Center for Reconciliation, which is a specialized center in George Mason University. Part of our work is supporting new Truth Commission efforts that are emerging across the country. Other processes we are supporting are in Maine and in Iowa. And we will be very, very happy to exchange ideas and experiences with all of you.
Thank you, Eduardo. And we'll be hearing more from him later on in this meeting. Let's go with Pat Adams. You're on mute, sir.
Thanks. Hi, Pat Adams, community member. I followed the COAB for a few years, and I'm part of the Portland Peace Team, the nonviolent peacekeepers here in Portland, following the IPAC group and also the Restorative Justice Council. So I'm very interested to find out what's happening here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go with Laurel next, please.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Laurel Singer. My pronouns are she and her. And I'm the executive director of a program called the National Policy Consensus Center. We're all about collaborative approaches to solving and addressing public issues and problems. So happy to be here.
Thank you. And Laurel's been doing a lot of background work with us. Appreciate seeing you as well. Mary Claire, you want to go?
Sure thing. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Claire Buckley. I am a she, her pronouns, and I work at the Portland Police Bureau, overseeing the Bureau's compliance with the DOJ settlement agreement. Thanks.
Thank you for being here. Claire? Claire? Let's go. Oh, there she is.
Hi, I'm just here to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan?
Yeah, thank you. Well, my name is Juan Carlos Lapuente. I think, Eduardo, we met in Colombia. I am Peruvian as well. And I'm right now I'm in Portland, Oregon. From different ways, I've been connected with the Truth Commission in Peru. Or my uncle Carlos Tapia was a commissioner, but I didn't work as Eduardo in the commission. But I worked with Gustavo Gutierrez through the Bartolomé Las Casas Institute, related to how to promote I don't know how to say, expand all the notion of truth commission or reconciliation, what means memory. And then in Colombia, I was the Peace Brigade's international coordinator for the country, and I work also with Oxfam related to, well, with Ivan Cepeda, all about this in Colombia. Now I live in Portland right now. I'm working, I get into this group through an invitation through EMO, Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, with whom we are working on a reckoning with racism effort with 42 teams. And I am Bishop's Associate of the Oregon Synod, working with Bishop Lori Larson Caesar. Okay, and I'm excited about what we can do here, right? So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. And last but not least, Barb.
Oh, I forgot, I was the executive, I don't know this stuff, but it could help, executive director for Amnesty International in Peru as well. Yeah, time ago.
Am I really last? Wow. Hi, my name is Barb Rainish. I'm a peer support specialist, citizen, and PCCEP groupie for the last couple of years. Amongst advocacy stuff, I've really started to learn more about all that's going on. And I'm mostly here to listen.
Thank you. Have we missed anybody in our introductions?
I think Claudia.
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Claudia Claudio. I'm the project assistant for PCCEP, and thank you guys for being here today.
Thank you. So before we get started with any of our other work, I'm going to turn it over to Theo to do a land acknowledgement for our space today.
Thanks, Lakiana. The city of Portland doesn't have an official land acknowledgement, so anything is said here that's just representative of the space here and of PCCEP. So thank you, Lakiana, for allowing me to do a land acknowledgement. My name is Theo Lada. I use he, him pronouns. I'm an indigenous person of the land, and PCCEP wants to acknowledge that the land that we sit on right now and that we're having this Zoom on rests on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, the Wasco, the Cowlitz, the Cathlamet, Clackamas, a variety of bands of Chinook, the Tualatin, the Kalapuya, the Malala, and a bunch of other tribes who made their homes and their communities along the Columbia River. And I want to thank them, and I want to honor their legacy here. They're still alive, they're still thriving. Indigenous people are still very much a part of the fabric of the community today. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Theo. Next, in kind of grounding our work today, we also want to acknowledge Black lives and the recent and ongoing struggle for Black liberation and the recent events, including the verdict of the trial of Derek Chauvin yesterday. So we want to recognize people, including George Floyd, who was 46 when he was murdered, Ma'Khia Bryant, who was 16 and passed away or was murdered just yesterday in Ohio, and also Calvin Jackson III, who was shot and killed here in Portland Monday night due to gun violence. And so we're just going to take a 30-second moment of silence to remember those lives and other Black lives lost here and around the country. Thank you for that. So we're going to get started into our work. What I'm going to do is give a little bit of an overview of where PCCEP comes from, the Portland Community and Community Engaged Policing, which is what this meeting is part of. And then I'll talk a little bit about the work that PCCEP has done, and then specifically what this planning committee is all about. So kind of got a big chunk of stuff to go through, but the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing comes out of a 2014 Department of Justice settlement agreement between the City of Portland and the Portland Police Bureau and the Department of Justice, which recognized a pattern or practice of excessive use of force with persons perceived or to actually have mental health challenges. And as part of the settlement agreement, there was a number of stipulations that were made, one of which was the creation of a community body which would help oversee the settlement agreement, as well as bridge the gap between the community and the Portland Police Bureau and make recommendations on how they could improve their practices. The Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing is the second iteration of that. There was a former committee which did not work out, and when Mayor Wheeler was first elected in 2016, he disbanded that previous committee, and we were created in 2017. Since our creation, our committee has just been working to build all sorts of frameworks for a committee and a process that really was unclear and didn't really have a blueprint to follow. And so that's everything from bylaws to structuring our committee to exactly what our scope of work has been. We have 4 subcommittees. This kind of technically functions as the 5th one, but we have a policy and settlement agreement subcommittee, a youth subcommittee, a racial equity subcommittee, and a behavioral health subcommittee, along with a steering committee that kind of organizes all of our work. So we've worked on a number of issues, from mental health work to specialized conversations around Black women and Latino community. And this subcommittee around a Truth and Reconciliation Commission really fits in with the other work that we've done, which is trying to bridge that gap in trust between the Portland Police Bureau and the community and all of the communities that are represented, and knowing that there is an ongoing legacy of harm by the Portland Police Bureau, and looking at ways of how do we acknowledge that harm and create a path forward, which is not an easy thing to do. We're a 13-member committee that's volunteer. So that's some of the work we've done. Initially, in one of our recommendations for what I believe was an annual report for the Portland Police Bureau in 2018, we suggested the creation of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And fast forward to 2020, Mayor Wheeler then directed our committee to create a 5th subcommittee around the Truth and Reconciliation process, which brings us to where we're at today, and some of the framing that I would think is helpful for us before we dive into the other pieces of this, which is first and foremost that this is not the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it never will be. Our task is to create a recommendation for the city of Portland on how a Truth and Reconciliation model could be utilized in Portland. And to that extent, what the committee has done since starting in, I want to say late January, is to start convening community members and kind of planning out a scope of work, right? What truth, what reconciliation are we looking at, right? Out of all of the harms and forms of oppression that exist within our city and within the context of the United States. And leading up into February, the main piece that the committee had come to an agreement on was that we believe that it should focus on race, specifically on harms to African-American community members. Since then, the committee has been on a couple-month hiatus since February, when one of the leading member who was leading this, Kia, stepped down, and Taji, Ann, and myself kind of stepped in to take the work. And we kind of took a step back to really understand more about what the Truth and Reconciliation process was, and connected with a number of international experts, including Eduardo and Anchi, who I believe might be on this call or might not be, and another individual, Manuel, as well as a woman named Laurel, who's local here with PSU. And so in that initial meeting, where was kind of just like an exploratory meeting, they presented us with so much information that we really realized how little we knew about the process. And so we continued to meet with them in order to better understand what Truth and Reconciliation is. And that's the beauty and the danger of this work, is that with so many ideas being thrown around in our community and such a need to grapple with police violence, that a lot of ideas are thrown out there without really understanding what they are. And so that's part of the work of what we're trying to do, is to make sure that all the parties involved, from the city, from the community, and the police bureau, understand what it actually is that we would be attempting to undertake. And so, but within this subcommittee, we are not suggesting that it should be taken. We just want to merely present how it should be gone about, if it is to, and some of the considerations. And one of the main things that we're also coming in with is an understanding that we do not believe at its current state that the city, the police bureau, or the community is ready for a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, that there is a lot of behind the scenes work that must be done. In a meeting we had probably about a month ago, the Mayor Wheeler agreed with us that he does not believe that we are ready. And so how do we work within that context, knowing that the parties aren't ready, and also knowing that we don't know a lot about this work? How can we prepare the city for that eventuality if that's something that they choose to pursue? And so what we're going to be doing over the course of the next meetings is having these international experts run a series of webinars to educate the community on the various parts that could go into a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But we just want to make sure that it's very clear that this is not the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that this is not a final piece of any of the work. And so to just be open to learning, be open to non-closure, be open to the fact that we don't know all the pieces, and that we will make some mistakes along the way. So that's the context for how we arrived here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Taji to introduce some of the folks that we've been kind of learning from over the past month or so.
Yeah, and I feel like it's a pretty natural transition since they had already introduced themselves initially. But Eduardo Gonzalez is, like you mentioned, works with the Mary Hawk Center for Reconciliation, and was also member of the first Peruvian Truth Reconciliation Commission that happened back in the 90s, I believe. And he's been working with us along with Auntie Pentikanen, who I believe might either be on his way or could not make it tonight. Both of them have been working with us, like Lakiana mentioned, and now we'll be talking a little bit about what they put together for the webinars, what the ideas behind that, and like emphasizing what Lakiana mentioned before. What we really want to do here is build education and awareness behind the importance of truth and reconciliations, and importance of it in this city specifically, because I think that's going to be an important first step in getting more community members and more community groups who are interested in this work involved, because I think it needs to have a strong coalition of folks who are interested in it, because if we can get past that stage and share a really good recommendation to the city about where we want to go, I think it'll really really emphasize the importance of moving forward with it sooner rather than later. And so with that, Eduardo, this microphone is yours. I don't know if you need to share your screen or anything, and I think Clyda can help you with that.
Thank you so much, Taji. I don't know if you have shared the program of the webinars that Auntie sent to you guys. Otherwise, I would like to probably put it on my screen.
Yeah, no, we haven't shared it.
All right, so let me, okay. All right, so, well, probably it's not a great idea because the letters are so small, but okay, let's see. Sorry about that. Can I share my screen? Yes, I can. Okay, here we are. So, yes, as Taji and Lakiana have been saying, this meeting here is not the Truth Commission. This is not how a Truth Commission looks like. And the sense of the conversation is precisely to start discussing what a Truth Commission is, whether a Truth Commission is what is needed, and how to inform that process with the characteristics that would be needed for a city like Portland, if that is the way the city wants to go to. a couple of months ago, probably, correct me, Lakiana and Taji, but we have had already a few conversations. But a couple of months ago, my colleague Antti Pentikainen and myself were participating in a seminar organized by Ohio University by an initiative called the Divided Communities Project, which is looking into reconciliation and truth processes in different cities around the US. And at that point, we met with Laurel, and she told us about this very interesting process in Portland. And so that is how Laurel facilitated a conversation and let us know about the ways in which Portland was approaching the possibility of a truth commission. We know that there have been a couple of bumps in the road. Of course, these processes are never easy. And evidently, when you have a large group like your group, there are going to be different ways to look at things, and everybody needs to be on the same page in order to start. So what we suggested was that perhaps while the agreement with the city is achieved, and during the time that is needed to finalize arrangements with the city, it would be useful to have exposure to what the international practice is regarding truth commissions. And that is why we prepared a proposal, which is still a draft really, and it's on my screen, on webinar consisting of 3 parts and probably a 4th specific discussion. And the notion is to share with you some of the experiences that have taken place in different parts of the world, so that you can see whether this is the route you want to go, whether there are adaptations that you would do to this model, whether you think that perhaps there are other ways to go about it. And I will go on that on a moment, but first of all, I wanted to share with you what is the way in which we see our relationship as the Mary Hawk Center with the different local initiatives that are taking place around the country. So we really think that our role is not to substitute the wisdom or the creativity of the different cities, of the different places that are undertaking a truth commission process. We are here to help, and that means basically that we just want to motivate the conversation and to help make the conversations useful, purposeful, and productive. So we do think that a truth commission cannot be the result of just a couple of academics or very brilliant people with lots of information who write terms of reference. We do think that the first precondition for a truth commission, a successful truth commission to take place, is consultation, which is why the first stage on our view is to do consultation and conduct a needs assessment. Of course, that is what should be happening in Portland right now, and that is what that is the kind of preliminary assessment that you guys are in. But that means that people in the different sectors of the community need to be building capacity and listening to each other in order to have an informed conversation of what is to be done. Only with that preparation, then you can have a process of design or a process of co-creation of what you want to do. What are the terms of reference? What is the legal mandate of an institution that would carry out processes of truth-seeking and or reconciliation in your city? And finally, a process of implementation. And our capacities in the center have to do with, of course, supporting cities and communities in all those three levels. So for starters, for the very, very, very beginning, what we are proposing is to have 3 conversations and 1 workshop with you guys. And the first conversation is to discuss, so what is truth and why is it so important? And we think that this is really not a philosophical or theoretical discussion. It's an extremely practical and, dare I say, political discussion in America today. This is, after all, a country where concepts and discussions of what is true or what is fake have had enormous importance and very consequential importance in the last few years. To decide what is accepted by a community as truth, to decide what is therefore important, is a fundamental political question. And we need to discuss why is it then that truth and the social discussion about what is true and what is fake is so significant and so important. And it has to do with all the discussions we are having today. The question about racism, the question about the institution of the police, the question about justice and what justice declares to be true, all those have to do with the question of what is truth and why is truth so significant. Truth is politically important, truth is legally important, and truth is emotionally important. Truth has to do with the possibility of achieving social justice. Truth has to do with the possibility of achieving criminal justice, as we have seen today. And truth has to do with the possibility of healing and putting persons in a better position to deal with the trauma that they have suffered, not just recently, but intergenerationally. So that's the first discussion that we want to have and we propose to have. The second one is to discuss about truth commissions. That is, the institutions that are built to recover the truth about human rights violations and injustice, because that's exactly what we are talking about. We are not talking just about the news. We are talking about human rights violations. We are talking about the violation of human dignity carried out by agencies of a state, of a government, whose only source of legitimacy is to protect its citizens, not to kill, maim, or torture its citizens. So the truth about those human rights violations is an obligation that is internationally recognized. And what we would like to do in the second discussion is to look at the what has been the legal basis and the political basis for the creation of truth commissions in other places, and to examine some cases, some examples. Of course, most people have heard about the very well-known example of the South African Truth Commission, but people sometimes get surprised when they hear that there have been about 40 truth commissions around the world, therefore that around 40 or perhaps more countries have already created one, and therefore there is enormous experience and also enormous variability, enormous diversity of commissions. And so we would like in this second conversation to present to you a few different models of how truth commissions have looked like in different places. The third question has to do with the other part of the equation, reconciliation. And this one is a tough one. It's a complicated discussion because when you talk about truth and reconciliation, well, you immediately create a tension right there in the name of the initiative. And this tension happens because, of course, there are people in the different communities that are very happy with the notion of reconciliation. Let's get together again. But not so happy about getting to reconciliation through exposure of the truth, through exposure of the facts, because it's uncomfortable, because it's disruptive, and because it challenges the societal order. And so looking at reconciliation without truth is impossible. At the same time, though, we need to recognize that sometimes the opposite also happens. That since we are enmeshed in a situation of injustice, there is so much distrust that some of us just prefer to stay in the stage of revealing the truth. And we don't want to look beyond revealing the truth towards some kind of settlement or resolution of the conflicts that we are living. And so this discussion, this third discussion, has to do with the question of reconciliation. It is a very complicated, very political, and very, I would say, polemical concept. In the place I come from, Latin America, human rights advocates like myself tend to hate the word reconciliation because it has been used by dictators, it has been used by thugs, it has been used by warlords to impose silence, right? We shake hands with our enemy, we sign a peace agreement, there we are reconciled. We don't need to look into the past anymore. That kind of shallow understanding of reconciliation is very damaging for a society and for victims, and we need to reject that. But we need to think anyway in some form of rebuilding society, in some form of building society anew, whether the word for that is reconciliation or healing or transformation or something else, we need to discuss that. But there needs to be a discussion about what for. Why is it that we will investigate the truth and reveal the truth? What is the kind of transformation we want to achieve through that? And so we need to examine that, and we need to examine how is it that concrete communities, concrete individuals face the need for healing in these processes. So those are the three discussions we want to have. What is truth? Why is it so important? How are truth commissions and what truth commissions look like? And why reconciliation is significant, problematic, and important too. If we have productive conversation on those three areas, then we thought that we could have a workshop. Hopefully, by the time we get to the third webinar, you will have already arranged the understandings with the city in order to better organize the work of this group and to ensure that the participation of the different members is adequately recognized. So if we and when we get to that particular point, we are proposing to have a workshop. And that workshop would be to imagine concretely in your characteristics, how should a truth commission look like? What would a truth commission need in order to be effective? And basically that has to do with the notion of envisioning certain terms of reference. What would be the essential elements of a legal mandate, the essential elements of a terms of reference for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in your community? What would be the key objectives? What would be the key functions? What would be the scope of the research for such an institution, for such an initiative? But again, we don't want to precipitate the discussion. We want to get there after having a conceptual and political discussion with you guys on the three first topics. And only then, when you feel that this is a discussion that has been productive, we go to the concrete practical elements. In my experience, having worked 20 years with truth commissions in different parts of the world, I find that very often truth commissions have a problem when the political leaders, the political authorities come and say, hey, we want to create a truth commission, give me the mandate in 1 month and I will create it, right? It doesn't work that way exactly. I mean, it's great that sometimes political leaders have the political will to do something and have the intention to act. It's good that they give a priority to these issues, but truth commissions are things that require careful discussion, careful understanding, and careful consultation. So it's better to have a good, constructive discussion first, and then approach the practical things. Too many times I have gone to a place where they say, by the way, we already created a Truth Commission. We are just discussing about who to name to the commission. I mean, sometimes people start the discussion by the name of the commission, by the members of the commission, rather than discussing it, starting the discussion with the objectives of the commission, the focus of the commission, the terms of reference of the commission. So what we are proposing is to take the longer but safer route of having a conceptual and political conversation that is productive, that is organized, and then get into the practical elements of a workshop. And as I said, hopefully by that point, you will have arranged with the city what are the mechanisms that, that are going to take place in order to facilitate this discussion. So that's what I wanted to say, Lakayana, Taji, and I will be very happy, of course, to engage in the conversation with the participants.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. I really appreciate that presentation. Now we'd like to open it up to questions that people may have about what Eduardo has shared, and kind of any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I already saw we had one question in the comments. Kathy, if you just want to say it again, that would be great to kick us off with it.
Should I read the questions that I see emerging in the chat?
Yeah, I also see Kathy unmuted, so you can read it or she can repeat it, however y'all want to do it.
Well, I mean, it was one sort of more practical question, which is, I am somewhat familiar with truth and reconciliation efforts at a national level in various countries, in my case, mostly in Africa. But has it happened in the US at a subnational level? And I'd be curious to know more about when and where and what.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Kathy. Indeed, truth commissions were a national level invention, so to speak. You're completely right about it. Myself, coming from Latin America, well, that is where commissions emerged. Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, etc. Those were national level commissions. And that makes sense in a way, because of course, you have had national level processes, civil wars, dictatorships, and that is the level at which the healing needed to happen and the truth seeking needed to happen. But for some time now, there is some kind of a trend of local level commissions happening, not just in the US, but in many places. A few years ago, Brazil, which is also not casually a federal country, created a National Truth Commission to look into the legacy of a military dictatorship that they had in the 70s and 80s. And since Brazil is federal, what happened was that the different states, and in many cases municipalities, started to create their own local truth commissions in parallel to a national truth commission. And so at some point there were about 30, 35 truth commissions in a single country, investigating what had happened during that military dictatorship in their different cities, states, etc. Moreover, in Brazil, there were truth commissions created at the level of universities, unions, and different civil society initiatives. So that's an interesting process. In Mexico, something very similar happened. Mexico did not create a truth commission in spite of the sufferings that they had also during the 70s and 80s under the one-party system. And they have not had a truth commission in spite of the suffering they have had in the drug trafficking wars that they had in the last 20 years. So also in Mexico, some states created their own truth commissions. The state of Guerrero, the state of Oaxaca have created their own truth commissions without waiting for the national government to do that. And that happens due to different motivations. On the one side, it may be that the community does not believe that the national system is going to do anything. And therefore you start because you don't think that you can wait until the national government or the federal government is going to work. And therefore you go forward because you cannot wait, because your city, your locality needs this kind of exercise. So that has happened. In other cases, it has to do more with a priority, a focus. A few years ago, Indonesia had a peace agreement in a small region, a separatist region called Aceh. And part of the agreement, the peace agreement with Aceh, was to establish a truth commission in that province. So they established a truth commission, which just finished its work. And the logic was to recognize, yes, we have had a conflict in this part of our country. We need to look into it. So I think the interesting thing with truth commissions, in my view, and that is why I'm so passionate about it, is that they're very flexible. They're very plastic. Since they are very new institutions, people can really be very creative about it. It's not like a court of law. Courts of law are the same everywhere. They have the same mechanisms, the same tradition. It's a very static form. And I say this fully in the understanding that the US is a country obsessed with tribunals and with trials. You know, this is a country that has trials for TV shows and who created the genre of the judicial thriller, right? But trials are so static in form. They are always the same. Truth commissions vary a lot. They're very, very creative in that respect. In the US, in the early 2000s, the city of Greensboro, North Carolina, created a truth commission. It was not exactly the city, but a coalition of civil society organizations in the city. Then later on, the state of Maine created a truth commission too, to look into the treatment of indigenous children in the state. And that was an agreement by the governor of Maine and the chiefs of the different Wabanaki tribes in the state. So there are a few examples. And what is happening in the last couple of years, particularly due to the power being developed by the Black Lives Matter movement, is that several truth commissions have started to emerge in different states and different parts of the country. There is something called the Truth and Healing Council in California right now, which is examining the history of California and the indigenous nations in that state. There is something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on Lynchings in Maryland. And there are about a dozen truth commissions at the city level. There is one in Iowa City, there is one in Charlotte, North Carolina. For some reason, there are a lot in North Carolina. And so, well, in fact, New York City, where I am now, announced also the establishment of a truth commission just a couple of weeks ago. So yes, there is some kind of a movement taking place. And so it is interesting because it's not like, you know, all those cities decided to do it following some kind of plan or some kind of coordination. It's just that the movement for racial justice has found in a very spontaneous manner that affirming the truth is fundamental. And they have looked into the world to find examples, to find inspiration, and they probably found South Africa, right? Which obviously is a fundamental example because they were also fighting institutionalized racism. So that is how I think we come to this particular situation.
Thank you.
One more quick thing I would say, if that's okay, Anne, on that is, and something that Lakiana alluded to, and Eduardo obviously has been positioning us to understand more, is that with what we planned sort of as of now for the TRC process, we've only understood that that we want to address the issue of police brutality and the effects it's had on the BIPOC community specifically. And so that focus really does have a lot of creative malleability to it that I think will really have the ability to take advantage of when building more coalition and learning more about the process, because there's so much more details to how other cities and how other states and how other countries have handled this before. And I think that there's going to be obviously a lot more to learn going forward, but I think we're definitely in a good spot. So definitely love to hear any more questions that folks have.
I mean, just one last comment, not so much a question that I want to add to this is, since I'm probably the only person, I'm not sure, who lives outside Portland proper, I'm hoping you can, but I'm very interested in this process regarding the relationship between police and people of color, the BIPOC community. I'm hoping your scope will be larger than Portland. That's all. Okay.
Yeah, Juan, go ahead.
Thank you. No, I'm thinking about Eduardo, how what I notice, this is just an opinion, but what I notice is that people tend to bring a solution very fast. Here, what is the solution? What is reparation? Okay, let's do it. Let's pay. Let's do this kind of thing. How can there's room for imagination and the deep truth that is hidden sometimes about how mindsets are operating that causes so much damage. It's not just only one action, it's actions, but not only actions, it's also like beliefs or mindsets that are hidden or we don't talk about that. So how can we engage with community, with neighbors, to imagine what healing looks like? And also being humble, with humbleness, because sometimes we want to do everything in 2 years, and we are just one generation, carrying many wounds in our bones, and we want just to do it in 1 year or 2 years. So how can we be honest to a long-term process, but really deep? So we are not just playing a role to satisfy some people, right?
Yeah, thank you, Juan Carlos. It's very rare to find another Peruvian in a meeting. So,
with Pisco, I have
with Pisco.
Yeah,
but, that's our Peruvian national drink. But as you know, Juan Carlos, we had a Truth Commission in Peru 20 years ago. And this was to deal with a 20-year-long internal conflict that was compounded by the effects of a dictatorship. And that is only 20 years in our history. And we are still going through the very painful process of dealing with the consequences of that conflict. We still have political processes, political powers that derive their legitimacy from what they did during that war. We still have criminal cases open against people who committed human rights violations in that war. We still have a number of perpetrators in jail who are probably going to go out of jail in the next couple of years because they were sentenced so many years ago. And we still are in the middle of a process of reparation. And probably more painfully, we still have thousands of families who have not found the fate or whereabouts of their disappeared loved ones. So, and that is one conflict, right? An internal conflict from the 1980s, 1990s. Imagine what it is to look into the truth of 400 years of mistreatment of people of color in this country, the legacies of crime against humanity like slavery, like the extermination of indigenous peoples, like the mistreatment of the different routes and waves of immigrant population that came into this country. So there is so much trauma that has been accumulated and that has reverberated intergenerationally, that yes, we should not start this process with the notion that we are going to find a panacea, some kind of magic wand, right? What a Truth Commission is at best an opportunity to have an organized and a productive and a consequential conversation on these topics so that we can give energy to a transformation agenda. That is what Truth Commissions do at best. In our country, in the case of our country, Peru, a Truth Commission was the first time that the population at large was able to hear directly from indigenous victims of human rights violations in their own language about what had happened to them, for example. And it was just giving victims, giving survivors the possibility to be in the national agenda. And it is by no means a finalized process, but I do agree a lot with what Juan Carlos has just said. This is going to be, by necessity, a very long process. And what the Truth Commission is just the start of a process of healing there.
I just want to react. I'm very short. No, take too much. But it's like, I think also based on the Peruvian experience, that the Truth Commission also was a space in which people were legitimized in some way about, like, for example, here in Portland or in Oregon, who are the stewards of the hidden stories? And people say, what if people are doing that? What people? But it might be that the Truth Commission also will be a space in which all those people who are stewarding hidden stories in Oregon, even though deep truth can be legitimized in their work rather than being blamed or criticized. So that's another possibility. I think that a space of legitimization of people publicly about their efforts through different hidden stories in Oregon.
Thank you. Eduardo, did you want to comment?
No, I completely agree with that. Something that we need to realize is, you know, I want to go back to the question of the comparison with a trial and with a court of law. Trials are places where testimony is a very specialized thing. It's something that depends on the decision of the prosecutors to use or not to use. And a testimony is something that is subject to a very specialized and sometimes frustratingly specialized technical process of dissecting it. Because everything in a trial is so complex and so technified. In a Truth Commission, you really have the opportunity of valuing and honoring what Juan Carlos is calling the stewards of the stories, right? In the end, we're talking about not just those persons whose story is important to make the case or to disprove the case. We are talking about the stories of everyone involved in this situation from different places, different stakeholders, people who survived, people who benefited from the system, people who were detached observers. Everyone has a story to tell. And what the Truth Commission does is create the opportunities for people to come together and share those stories. And honoring that, I think, is extremely important, extremely significant. We have to understand that when we talk about issues like police brutality, issues like discrimination in the labor force or in access to living quarters, etc., we are talking about very toxic, sad, terrible stories that have affected the lives of so many people. So it's like working with very toxic matters. And if we don't work with them socially as a community, if we don't create a process to deal with such toxicity as a community, it's going to be left in the hands of the people who suffer the harms. We are just condemning people to suffer and continue suffering and continue dealing with these very toxic stories on their own, right? And what we are trying to do with the Truth Commission is to recognize the fact that we all have responsibility for the toxicity that has been created in our social life, and we are all going to work together in order to contain this and to transform the situation. That's basically how I see it. So working with stories is something that demands extreme responsibility and extreme care.
Eduardo, this reminds me of something that you shared with us previously, the concept of a year of truth, where if you could talk a little bit more about that. It was involving having people share their truth and different communities within our larger community.
I don't remember if it was me or was Auntie, but if I am not wrong, this is an initiative that has taken place in different places, actually. There are different countries where this has happened. And just, I mean, now that you said the year of truth, I'm thinking of Indonesia precisely. Indonesia had one of the most brutal, murderous dictatorships of the Cold War era, resulting in hundreds of thousands of killings in that country, really horrendous levels of violence. And in one of the anniversaries of the coup d'etat that started that dictatorship, activists all over the country launched something, the Year of Truth. I don't remember if we mentioned this before, but what they did was to launch truth-seeking initiatives all over the country. So basically to look into the older people who had lived the repression of those years, who told their stories, the survivors who told stories in safe spaces, disseminating these stories, disseminating the stories of the indigenous communities that are oppressed by the Indonesian state. And so they called that the Year of Truth, and they involved all the human rights agencies in the country, the NGOs, the victim organizations, to launch these initiatives all over the place. And I think that's a beautiful undertaking, actually. I'm thinking also that has a lot to do with what the US is living now. The fact that there are perhaps 20, 30 truth commissions being created around the country without any previous coordination is significant. It means that people are coming together to understand that truth is important. Also, it's important to remember here, there are national initiatives also to create a national truth commission. There is legislation presented in the House by Representative Lee from California and Senator Booker from New Jersey. There is a proposal by Representative Haaland from Arizona, if I'm not wrong, on a truth commission on the treatment of indigenous peoples that has been seconded by Senator Warren from Massachusetts. So there are national initiatives going on right now. Something very interesting is happening in this country. Local truth commissions bubbling up all over the place, and a few national initiatives also taking form. So I think that this is a movement, very spontaneous. No one planned it this way, but it is happening. And I think it's very important when you are creating something for your own community to know that you're not alone in this, that there is some kind of a movement taking place, and indeed more than a year, perhaps a decade of truth.
Okay, are there any other questions? I see Barb does. We want to allow time for people to ask questions, and then we also want to reserve some time for next steps. So who has a question they'd like to ask? You can go ahead. I can't see the hands very correctly. Kathy, go ahead.
I will ask a question, but I'm happy to defer to anyone else because I already asked a question. Is it,
In
did
the
Barb,
chat?
did Barb want to ask a question? Okay, so my question is, since all of these processes involve power dynamics, what is the real motivation and the incentive for those in positions of power? Whether it's police, whether it's politicians, whether it's or elected officials or government or other employers for that matter. I don't, whatever we're talking about, to really, really genuinely and authentically participate in this process since they hold most of the cards.
Yeah. Well, typically, Kathy, I think it's a shift in the situation of power precisely. Typically, when this has happened at a national level, this happened because there was a political transition. This happened because a dictatorship was losing power and needed to negotiate its way out, or because a peace agreement was being negotiated to end a conflict. So as you, I think, suspect, in the context of your question, elites in power, if they are comfortable, they're not going to do this. They're not going to make an extra effort. They do that when they are compelled to by a change in the circumstances. And that has to do with, I think, a change in the balance of power, a change in the level of mobilization, and the change of the level of contestation by society that make the old system of control, the old system of domination useless. When you really need to start rethinking the conditions of the political life. So even if that means to accept a very costly, complicated, and disruptive process of truth-telling, right? Because at some point you need to realize that power has changed and life has changed, and you will have to change with it, or just engage in a futile resistance. That is what happened with the white minority in apartheid South Africa. At some point, they realized that the world had changed, that they did not have the external support that they used to have, and that they had to negotiate with Mandela and African nationalists to save the country, and save the country from themselves, from the white minority. And in the process of doing that, they had to negotiate a new constitution, they had to negotiate new power, and they had to have a truth commission, right? So I would say, since I haven't been to your city and I don't know your city, I don't know exactly what changed, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with active social mobilization. It has to do with a change in the attitudes, with a change in the public messages, in the public understanding of things. When that happens, politicians have to choose whether they entrench themselves and resist change at all costs, in a futile resistance anyway, or whether they try to find a constructive way of undergoing change. And this is probably the reason, but I wouldn't know without being there exactly. This is actually part of your own discussion, because it also means answering the question of why are we here and what is our role here? If our city, if our society is in the cusp of a possible transformation, then what is our role in that possible transformation, and how would truth-telling help that transformation? That's a very interesting open question.
And I would just say, in addition to that, that we've had multiple conversations with Eduardo already about this concept. So I think it's going to be one of the ones that ties to the other question that Juan was having earlier about the outcomes of this work. Because I think one of the, to your earlier question, yes, I think that Mayor Wheeler, for sure, like Eduardo was saying, is more motivated to see a Truth and Reconciliation Commission come about. And I think that it's been very promising with how he's moved forward with the recommendation and asked us to make this planning committee and present where the city is at. And so it puts us in a promising position, but it really does take the coalition of people in the community who want to see the change. And when we show up saying that, it doesn't look good if the other side of that situation, the politicians, the people in power, do not want to respond, do not want to reconcile, because I think it would put PPB in a very bad position to not say that they have community engagement desires, but don't want to show up to try and fix the relationship. One of the largest issues of relationships with the community, which has been police brutality and the effects it's had on the BIPOC community. So I think that we're in a good position here to ask of this, to make this come about. And I think we're, with Eduardo and Auntie and all of the support from PSU as well, I think we're in a good position to build some more awareness around the importance of moving forward this fast. Not fast, but at a meaningful pace. Oh, and I think at that point, we actually, if anyone doesn't have any other questions, I think we're gonna lay out, we have one question for sort of the community, and then we're gonna lay out some next steps. Because I think one of the important things is that we'll be having to do a lot more community engagement efforts going into the webinars to make sure people come to them. And we'll also, of course, record it and upload it, but there'll be opportunities to ask questions. It's a good opportunity to get all the information you need. And obviously there'll be 3 of them though, so plenty of time. So we just wanted to get 2 things. One, we were trying to see who else do you think we should be making sure comes to the webinars, starts getting involved in this room, in other rooms, that in other spaces that we may have the webinar, who should be coming. And then there was one other question. Oh yeah. And then about like general, I guess, availability that you as the community have. We're trying to lay out plans for the webinars. And so we're trying to get that set up, but we just want to see if there's anything we should like try not to schedule around to the dates, because it obviously won't work for everyone, but we'll try to make sure some of them work for everyone. So those are the first 2, and then from there we'll go to next steps.
I'll just say real quick, I'll just share that even as someone who's been at a lot of protests and follows a lot of stuff and how the city and police and different interests have been extremely violent to people, even just having this conversation is very upsetting, just because of the emotions it brings up. So I'm just sharing that for me. And so even the talk of starting to bring people in, and the fact that Mayor Wheeler is in with this, those are sensitive, there are sensitive elements there. So those are just feelings I'm having. And I think everyone has some level of understanding for that. And I think Eduardo said something like, the testimony for these kinds of things has to be dealt with very carefully. I'll look at the word, extreme responsibility and extreme care. So yeah, I'm just voicing that level of anger, just yeah. And I want to say that you all have done a great job at specifying that this is not the commission itself, but I think as you try to bring people into this and announce it to the community, that's going to be a very tricky process to navigate right now, especially, and probably for quite a while.
Yep.
Which, just to add on to that, is exactly why we're saying, nobody's ready for this, right? Especially the powers that be. And so I think part of our recommendation is, what would it take for us to be in that position? Mm-hmm. Because yeah, things just as they are right now, we'd have to be, different things would have to happen in order for us to be ready for it.
And that, in my mind, and what we've talked about, is why we want to focus on education and educating people first. That's kind of our thought on this.
If there's not, we can probably get folks. If there's, we'll just continue this list and continue just to send it out to folks. If no one has any specific names of any organizations or that that we should reach out to try to get involved in this. I know that we will do the general outreach that PCCEP does to the connections that we have already. And then if anyone has any availability that they wanted to lay in the chat or send it to Claudia, that would be helpful. And then I think in regards to next steps, we were, like I said, we have to schedule the webinars, but we're going to figure out those dates sooner than later. Hopefully we'll meet next week and get those dates out. I think we'll either decide all the dates or we'll decide some of the dates and get all of that out as soon as possible. And then like Lakiana mentioned in the beginning, the goal here after the 3 webinars, there'll be a 4th one where we'll have an opportunity to do a workshop. And that's when we'll work on crafting where the community is at in regards to being ready for the Truth and Reconciliation and what it's going to take and what it could potentially look like for Portland to take on a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And then presenting that. And I think there was I think there was I guess, floating in the air deadline of June, I think, because of city council times when they have their sessions, but I don't know if that's when we'll have everything done. But I think the goal is to have it done early before the end of June, I would think then at that point. If it's not like done in June, like it'll be done in the end of June, but like maybe presented after June is what I mean to say. Okay, anything else, Anne or Lakiana? If anyone doesn't have their email in the email that's been getting the ones that came to this or to the flyers, you can put it in the chat or send it to Claudia. Actually, that'd be better. And we can make sure.
I wanted to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Barb, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand raised. Could you use this time now to ask a question? I'm sorry if I missed it. Okay, I'll talk with Barb offline. Anyways, go ahead, Taji.
Yeah, I think she just jumped off. I don't know. Okay, well, I guess if there's no other questions, please send your emails if you don't have them already sent, like I said, and we'll hopefully be able to meet. I don't think we set a date for the next time will be the first webinar. So there'll be flyers and everything sent out about that. You'll get it if you're getting this. If you heard about this, you'll probably hear about that. So thank you all so much and have a great rest of your afternoon, and we'll hopefully talk soon.
Who's the point person about all, like for helping us? Like who's the point person? Always Claudia or Ann Campbell?
Yeah, Claudia can direct you to all this stuff for the meetings and whatnot. And if you have any questions, like you want to get to Eduardo or to Auntie, she can direct them to us or you can email us. It's just all of our emails are first and last name with a dot between the two.
Yeah, this is great. This is great. Like
yeah,
I know it's hard, but it's good.
Yes,
thank you everyone.
Thank you all for joining us. And yes, my email is in the chat. So if anyone has any questions or wants to get put on the email list, please do send me an email and I will get you guys wherever you guys need to go with PCCEP. So thank you guys again for joining us.
Thank you. And
thank you.
everyone.
Eduardo will call you. Yeah.